Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Michelle Amuvi, and I'm a Programme Manager for the DARE UK Programme. Here today to talk to you about the funding opportunity that we released last week for early TRE adoption. So today in the webinar, it's an hour long, and we're going to talk you through a few things, a bit of an overview around the transformational programmes, what it is that we're looking for in this work that we're funding, who's eligible to apply, a bit more on the application process, PIE, key dates, and then the main part of today is really just giving you an opportunity to ask any questions that you may have, and we will do our best to provide answers to those questions. So that'll be the bulk of today's session, the Q&A. So first of all, as shared online, this funding opportunity is about supporting early efforts around TRE capabilities. So we have some driver projects who we worked with in the previous phase, and we're now looking at how to take their work forward to make them production ready. But in order to do that, we need support from TREs to help test the solutions that they're coming up with, see how technically feasible they are, look at information and governance. So there's lots of different aspects that need to be looked at before these solutions can be production ready and ready to scale up on a much larger scale. So the focus of this opportunity is working with those solutions around different aspects. The list is not exhaustive, but there's some suggestions of what you might want to apply to do. So the Phase 2 Transformational Programme has three key components. The first aspect is what I've just mentioned previously, the transformational programmes with £5 million available to them. And they are looking at 3 or 4 key things: federated analytics, AI model training in TREs, semi-automated disclosure, and then how we can have common standards across TREs. How can we make sure that TREs can speak to each other and work together? So it's one overall programme with themes within them, 3 themes within them, but those themes are also working on integrating to help provide solutions and improvements to how TREs are used in the UK. So there's £5 million available for that, and that work is due to start around the end of February next year. Then we have this funding opportunity, and there's £1.85 million available for that funding opportunity. And this is for an invitation for early adopters to work with us and look at the viability of those new capabilities. So, taking those solutions, supporting them, testing them, and adopting them, and thinking about where there might be flaws, bottlenecks in the system, where things can be improved upon. Lastly, and there's an asterisk against the £3.8 million because this is something that is subject to approval from our programme board, but potentially will be happening in Phase 2, inviting researchers to conduct research using these new capabilities. So having use cases that then can prove the effectiveness of the solutions that have been developed. So that will happen later on in Phase 2, so long as we get approval from the programme board to move forward with that aspect of work. And just a note to say that all of these figures are 80% FEC. So when you're applying for funding, it's at 80%, not 100% for the economic costs. So moving on to the transformational programme team. For this funding opportunity, those who are funded will have to work very, very closely with the transformational programme. And the whole purpose of it is to work with the solutions that they have come up with. So therefore, it's really important that prior to applications being submitted, you have conversations with the relevant leads about the work that it is that you intend to do. So they can discuss with you, understand whether it's feasible, think about the best approach, and then give a letter of support from the relevant theme lead for that work. So please do make sure that you contact the relevant person. So we have Chris Cole, who he was the lead of the SARCHA programme in Phase 1, and is looking at TRE reference architecture and standards. And then Carol Goebel, Phil Quinlan, and Simon Thompson are our leads for federated analysis. So if you want to do some work around that theme, you contact the 3 of them. And then Jim Smith will be looking at AI and semi-automated disclosure control. Now, you don't have to work with only one of the themes or all of the themes. It depends on what you feel you have the capacity to do at the moment. So just reach out to the relevant theme leads or leads as appropriate. And for the contact emails for each of these leads, they are available in the call specification. Their emails are written there in full. If for whatever reason you are unable to reach them or you're unable to find the contact email addresses, please feel free to email myself, Michelle Amugi at dareuk.org.uk, and I'll be happy to link you up with the relevant theme leads. In terms of funding, and just to note that we did release a pre-announcement a couple of weeks before. The details have changed. I think, overall for the best, because previously it was 200K, but now, so officially for this opportunity, there's up to £400,000, 80% VEC available, and the total fund is 1.85 million. Just some key things to note here. The spend profile is not evenly distributed. So in the financial year 24 to 25, there's £500,000 available. And then the next financial year 25 to 26, the remaining 1.35 million is available to spend. So please do factor that in when you're thinking about your costing for the projects. And it is quite strict. It's not quite strict, it is strict. There is no option to shift the funds across the financial year boundary. They are set in stone. Now, to note, the costs for these projects can be claimed from January 6th. So, for example, if your projects don't commence, so they're not signed off, the award letter of contracts is signed off till, let's say, the 23rd of January, you can still claim costs from the 6th of January. So those costs can be backdated. At the moment with the application form, there isn't a funding cost template, but it is something that we are putting together and we'll share with each of you who have attended this session today and also put online. The funding cost template, essentially it's to help us. This is a rapid funding call. We're aiming to get money out the door as soon as possible because we have that 500K to be used in this financial year. So to help us speed up that administrative process, if you are able to complete the funding cost template, it will be helpful to us because it would just make the process a bit quicker, having it completed ahead of time. So once that form is available, I will share that with you via email. Just to note, we follow UKRI guidelines on who is eligible for funding. So this money actually is coming from UKRI via HDR UK. Therefore, we have to stick to UKRI guidelines on who is an eligible organisation. There is a link in the call specification to the UKRI guidelines on this. Please do have a read through and check to see whether your organisation is eligible for funding under the guidelines. If it is the case that it's not eligible for funding, please do reach out to us, contacting us on the inquiries email address and also contacting our procurement team at HDR UK. And just, it's a conversation, just reach out to us and flag it with us. We're not promising anything, but it's something that we want to be aware of and then we can look into and see how to move forward potentially. In terms of applying, the application form is available on our website. It's a case of submitting and completing the application in full. The deadline is 9 AM on the 10th of December, 2024. And the application will need to be emailed to inquiries@dareuk.org.uk with contracts in copy. And with that, we will need the application form completed, and then also a letter of support, not most importantly, but importantly, we must have a letter of support. If an application is received without the letter of support, it won't pass the compliance checks and won't be considered. So please do make sure, as said beforehand, you're getting in touch with the relevant leads, having a conversation with them, and then as a result of that, getting the letter of support from them to support your application. So just key points there. In terms of application for the assessment, you may have noticed that we have shared the scoring criteria with you. So it's linked in the call specification and also in the news piece on our website. There's a link to the scoring criteria. Do have a look through that very carefully. It essentially sets out what the panel will be using to assess your applications. There's the questions at the top, and underneath there are bullet point questions broken down, the exact questions the assessors will ask. So just factor that into your responses, make sure that you are answering those questions in the text of your application. And we'll have a panel who will assemble to review your application form using this criteria. They'll score and then have a panel funding meeting where a funding decision will be made. And all outcomes will be communicated by the 20th of December, just before Christmas. Hopefully a nice Christmas gift for some, well, for those of you who do receive the funding. But yes, by close of business, Friday 20th, we will have contacted all applicants with the outcome of your applications. Now on PIE, DARE UK are very committed to meaningful PIE in our programme. It's something that's very important to us. However, we do recognise that, this is a rapid call. There's a lot perhaps to do in a short period of time. So we want you just to think about how you might be able to feasibly integrate PIE in your application where appropriate. And if you are integrating PIE into your application forms, please do make sure that those plans are factored into your project timelines and are costed into your project proposals. And just to note, there is no upper limit on how much you can allocate towards public involvement engagement. The amount you see fit is the amount you see fit. There's no percentage as to how much can go towards that. Now, irrespective of whether or not you choose to include PIE within your applications, we have wider work around PIE in the programme. So the transformational programmes, the core components that I discussed previously, federated analytics, AI, semi-disclosure control, and TRE, reference architecture, they will have PIE embedded with their work completely, and the wider programme will too. So the expectation is that the projects we fund in this funding opportunity will engage with that work. So PIE will not in any way, shape or form be absent from your work. If you factor it into your applications, great. In addition, or separate to that, there will also be PIE work that will take place in the programme that your work will dock into and support. So just finally, a summary of the key dates. So 10th of December, deadline for applications, 9 a.m. please, for that. And then the 20th of December is when the outcomes of applications will be shared. The start date for projects, 6th January, especially in terms of the funding being claimed. And if, from your side and our side, the contracts and the awards were able to start then the 6th of January is when the contracts will start. But the latest is the 17th of February, 2025. And that's just to give a bit of leeway because we understand it is a busy time, many offices will close over the Christmas season. So it may not be that the award letters are able to be signed and contracts commenced by the 6th of January. So there's just a bit of window of time around that. But by the 17th February at the very latest, projects should have commenced. And then projects will end at the latest on the 31st of March, 2026. So just over a year there for delivery of the work that you propose to do. So that's all from me. Rapid fire through. I'm going to stop sharing so I can see you all, and just open up to any questions. Start off by having a look at the chat and see the questions that come in, but thank you Fergus for responding to that question. Feel free to unmute yourselves to ask a question or to raise your hand either way. So you can do it in the chat or you can do it verbally. Got a question from Varney.
It's Kinga.
Kinga, sorry, apologies.
That's all right. What are the expectations for showing delivery within this financial year? So if we were to put in for some funding for this financial year, would something need to be shown at the end of this financial year for that funding?
Not necessarily in terms of outputs, as far as I know, but there'd have to be kind of you have to submit claims to say this is what we spent so far, and to claim that, but no outputs would need to be shown to justify that claim for funding at this point.
Super, thank you.
Question from Darren around whether there are any limits on how many applications can come from a single organisation. It's an interesting question. So one organisation submitting multiple applications. Can I ask Darren why it might be done that way?
Well, we've had some previous conversations around this, and there are a number of different arenas that we're kind of working on. So it may be that we have a couple of teams who are attacking this from a slightly different angle. So I just want to say if there's anything in principle where you're kind of trying to restrict this to one organisation or not.
It's an interesting question.
I
can see folks unmuted.
Yeah, happy to come in. So I mean, I guess the obvious sort of statement there, as long as there's no duplication, right? As long as there's no overlap in sort of the work that's being done between those applications. I suppose in principle, there's no reason why there couldn't be more than one application from the same organization. But again, just making sure that those applications are addressing different themes, different pieces of work. I guess that would be my answer to that. But in principle, there's no in principle reason. No, it's just that the panel will, of course, look at those applications and go, okay, are they distinct enough, right? Is there a clear separation in delivery? Yeah.
Thanks, Fergus. Other questions from anyone? John Sanderson. John, are you there?
Sorry, still muted, wasn't I, on the thing? Sorry, a bit of an obvious question, but the leads that we would need to discuss with, are they sort of well primed and with good availability? Because I appreciate there might be quite a bit of demand. Is that going to be challenging to get hold of them, or are they kind of quite freely available, I suppose?
They definitely are aware that we passed your details and that request for information will be incoming. Availability always a challenge, unfortunately, especially at this season, but they will endeavour to do their best. And as I said, if you're kind of struggling to reach them, ping me as well, copy me in, I'll do my best. But they're definitely primed and will do their best to make themselves available to respond to your queries and to obviously your request to work with them.
Super.
James?
Got a question on how the proposals will be evaluated. Do you have a sort of view on how things will be weighted? I mean, is it more about being able to act quickly, or are we looking at scale and scope of ambition, or breadth of collaboration, or any sort of steer on that?
It's a good question. I think, in the first instance, we do want this money to get out the door. So acting quickly is important, and that's partly, I guess, on you guys, in that you won't submit an application if you don't feel like you can, spend some of the money in this first season and ongoing from then. But definitely, primary is the usefulness in terms of what is going to be done and the value that we add to the program and the program of work that is being conducted. Is it something that is relevant and useful to our scope? That will be the primary consideration. But certainly things like the option or availability to start the work and to claim for costs from January will be factored in to that consideration. Fergus, would you like to add anything, please?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, James. I mean, it is going to be a spread, right? We are expecting kind of a spread of applications, both in terms of the scale of what they're proposing to do, how quickly they're proposing to do it, how quickly they can use sort of the funding. So I think there is going to be quite a mix. And essentially what the panel will need to do at the end of that is kind of look at the portfolio of applications that qualify as fundable, and then make some sort of a recommendation on, okay, based on this portfolio and what you're trying to do here, what's the strategic kind of prioritization we'd apply to this? So that's really what's going to happen. It is going to be a mix of factors. Yes, of course, there is sort of, because we have that sort of fiscal boundary pressure in terms of that spend, yes, that does play a part of it, but it's certainly not the only part. And it's not to say that if you could not do that, if you couldn't get things up and going in this fiscal year, that you're somehow not going to be considered, right? That's not the case, but it will be considered by the panel sort of strategically as a portfolio across a number of axes.
Thanks, Fergus. Okay, so I'll go to the chat first. We had a question here from Eleanor around whether this opportunity can link in with the existing secure data environment programme. Yes, we would definitely be happy to accept applications from the NHS SDE programme to support work on, whether it's one aspect of the priority areas that we have identified. We would, be more than happy to work with the NHS SDE programmes. First, if you want to add anything to that at all. Okay, and then let's see, okay, that's an interesting question. Is there a template for the letter of support? There is not a template for the letter of support at the moment. It's something that if people think is useful, we could provide. So perhaps I'll take that away and we'll have to think about that. But as it stands, there isn't a template for the letter of support. And the goal of asking for a letter of support to be provided is because this work is about working with the transformation programs to adopt and test their solutions. It's making sure that conversation has been had where you're saying, okay, this is what we intend to do, this is how we intend to approach it. And them saying, okay, yes, that does make sense. Yes, that can work with what it is that we're doing. So just to kind of, I guess, a feasibility check in essence. And then that support to be given on that basis, so that when the panel are considering applications, they are aware that the relevant themes are in support of the work that is going to be proposed or conducted. Will they withhold support if not in scope? Fergus, what do you have anything to say on that? Or
I mean, it is intended to be a pretty light touch letter of support, and we can also take this back with us and just think about whether there's a standard template for that that we could provide. It is really more about a sanity check, and yes, this is feasible, and we're sort of we're in support of this, than trying to withhold anything, right? Of course, if it's out of scope, if what you're proposing just doesn't make sense for the scope of the call or the scope of what the transformational program is trying to do, well, then of course, sort of, support would be withheld, if you want to term it that way, because it just wouldn't make sense, right? But it's more an in principle agreement that yes, this work makes sense. Yes, we should work together, and this is the theme, the areas that we're working together on. But it is intended to be pretty light touch. It's not supposed to be a sort of long, detailed letter of support. It's kind of in principle support to work together. I think we've also maybe missed a question. Sorry, if that's the end of that question. I think we missed one from Darren. Just on, could you clarify what you're expecting to be adopted that would classify an organization as an early adopter? I mean, I think it's sort of laid out in the call specification. The ideal sort of case would be essentially piloting some of these capabilities that we're looking to develop, right? At the end, right? Getting to the point where you can actually sort of pilot this in a real setting. Now, there's a gradient there. There's a spectrum of adoption, right? It doesn't just happen with a click of a finger. So the idea behind this call is to make room across that spectrum. So wherever you are as a TRE on that spectrum and where you want to get to on that spectrum is what this call is looking to support. So there is sort of room for you to define that in some sense for yourself, along with the transformational program. Does that answer your question, Darren? Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute, Darren.
It sounds like a slightly odd question, but what was driving at really is to what extent you expect any of this to be informed or driven by the SATRA specification.
Could you phrase that question again, Darren? I didn't understand it, or wasn't listening properly. Apologies.
I mean, this is really for the benefit of some of my colleagues who haven't necessarily been as close to this. I mean, we have the SATRA specification in progress, and there'll be another iteration or two. To what extent does that need to inform any of these kind of applications, or is there no real codependency there with SATRA?
I mean, I suppose there is certainly there is some codependency, right? And sort of evolving SATRA and sort of the work around SARTRA about reference implementations and infrastructure as code kind of implementations of the SARTRA spec. I mean, that's all sort of in the core specification, laid out in the core specification.
I think I need
so
to
yes,
read
I
the full
suppose.
specification.
yeah, perhaps. So yes, but again, if your focus, right, is not that theme of the transformational program, because there are 3 of them, and your interest is rather purely on, let's take another example, statistical disclosure control, and semi-automating that, or, you know, how do you do disclosure control on AI models within TREs? If that is purely your interest, then of course that's purely your interest, right? And you don't need to engage with the other themes necessarily, but that's your decision to make. What's the priority for you?
Yeah, okay.
Thanks, Bergus, for picking that one up. And then we have a question from Eleanor, just I think a clarifying question, just around whether or not we are looking for TREs to test feasibility of existing ideas or to come up with their own new ideas to pilot. So for this call, the focus is about testing the existing solutions that are there, and looking at the effectiveness, implementing them. So it's around existing. Now, future phase 2 funding potentially will be available to look at new, novel ideas. But the focus of this call is not that. The focus of this call is testing existing solutions already developed, and adopting those to then make sure that they are at a standard that can be scaled much more widely in the near future. And I hope that's answered your question. First, don't know if you have anything to add to that at all. Thanks. Okay. Well, great. Thanks, Eleanor. And then we had a question, which I think around the fact which Fergus has responded to in the chat already. If there's anything else in the chat, don't believe so. Any other questions? Fergus, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe I don't know if this will throw up questions potentially, but just something to also mention, I think, is this funding opportunity. We know it's a rapid funding opportunity, right? And we know there's sort of a rapid turnaround time here. And again, we say this in the call, the specification of the call, you know, based on sort of how this funding opportunity goes, the kind of uptake we get, the panel's decision on successful applications, there may be future funding opportunities which are aligned with essentially TRE adoption rights, so very much in the same space. So that's just something to put out there, but it will depend on sort of the outcomes of this this opportunity, and essentially the uptake of the funding available.
We've got a question from Andrea Mendes. How does an SME find a leader? So is that essentially that an SME would not come under UKRI eligible organisations, and therefore you'd be looking to work with an eligible organisation, and how that organisation might be sourced? Is that the vein of the question, Andrea?
No, sorry. Like, for instance, we are an SME, and if we wanted like to participate, we will be like a subcontractor, but someone would need to hire us for this role. I was wondering if there is like any platform or way of communicating, for instance, with entities that are thinking about doing an application that might be looking for SMEs to subcontract.
It's an interesting question. So normally we kind of leave that to you guys behind the scene in terms of like reaching out and then deciding who's going to work together. It's not necessarily something that we do in terms of matchmaking, but I think it's a fair point you made in that we want the right organisation to be working together to do this. So is there scope and opportunity for that? as it stands at the moment, it's not something that we do offer or have done or plan to do in this call as such. But I'll leave, yeah, so Fergus, what do you think?
I mean, I would only suggest, I
Okay,
mean, there
thank
are
you.
Sorry, yeah, Fergus
Andrea.
just add into that.
Yeah, Andrea, I would only, I would suggest that there are communities out there, open communities. The UK TRE community is one that sort of comes to mind, and maybe Michelle, we can, as a kind of follow-up to this call, when we send the slides, we can provide a bit of information about some of the communities out there. Those are communities that you can try to engage with, Andrea, just to see if there is appetite. But again, it's not something, we don't sort of provide that matchmaking sort of service, if you like.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you. And then just saw, yes, Lisa has raised her hand. Lisa, do you have a question?
Thank you. It's not a question actually, but something in response to Andrea's point that there is an industry concierge forum as part of the National Secure Data Environment Network. If I find, Michelle, the contact details for that concierge group, if I share it with you, it'd be great if that can be distributed out to the attendees of this meeting. Thanks.
Fantastic, Lisa. Thank you. Yeah, I'll share that. Good. Do we have any other questions at all? Clarice?
Yes, hello. Sorry, I missed the beginning of this meeting because I had a competing meeting, so I don't know what's already been discussed. But I'm part of a group who's going to be setting up a new TRE. Do you think this funding could help support that?
It helps support the setup of the TRE.
So there's already funding being brought in to set it up, but because it's not already a TRE that exists, we were unsure whether this would be something that could kind of supplement, if that makes sense.
Fergus, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm happy to come in, Clarice. I mean, without sort of, without more context, my suggestion is this is really for, the capabilities that we're talking about are for sort of relatively mature TREs, right? Or TREs at least that are already stood up, right, and running. If it's really about standing up a trusted research environment, I think you've probably got a lot of, my sense is, again, without any additional context, but you probably have a lot of challenges just doing that. And this is not funding for standing up a TRE. Of course, there is work, as Darren mentioned, the SATRA specification, which might inform some of how you would, set up your TRE. But this is not what this funding opportunity is about. This funding opportunity is about adopting capabilities that are being developed through the DARE UK program for TREs in the UK. TREs that exist, really. Yeah.
Thank you. That makes sense.
Good. Do we have any other questions? Take this opportunity. Okay. So, as stated, so application due on the 10th of December, 9 AM. I will communicate with you, each of you who have attended this webinar today, when the finance form is available. So if you are able to complete that, then that will be useful to us. Otherwise, we are available. So I'll just share the screen in a moment, because if you do have any other questions that come to mind, you can email us at the inquiries mailbox, and we will respond to those questions, and also share our responses to those questions with each of you via our website, so that that information that may be useful to you will also be available. And I think that's it. I'm also going to put up just a slide showing you how to keep in touch with the programme, because on our website and via our newsletter, we will share updates when other funds and opportunities are available. We'll share updates on events, etc. So if you haven't already signed up to the DARE UK newsletter, please do, so that you can stay looped into relevant communications. Hopefully get that up. Good. So there, and I will share that in the follow-up email, but we've just got the team email addresses to contact should you have any other questions. And then this is just some detail on how you can stay in touch with us. So newsletter, website, but perhaps most useful, I'll move on to the next slide, which has QR codes that you can scan now to take you to the subscription page for our newsletter, our website, and please do follow us on LinkedIn or X as well, just to stay up to date with the programme. Thank you so much for attending today. And we hope to see applications from you. And please do get in touch with any questions or queries in the interim. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks a lot. Okay. Bye.
Thanks.